Good morning, Moray Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Chagigah. We are on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. The learning of Chodesh Nisan has been sponsored. Refuah Shelma Sarah Rachel Bad Nora, that should have full recovery. Refuah Shelma Amen. Also has been dedicated and sponsored by Shahab and Shenaz Rabbi for health, happiness, and prosperity of their families. Be'ezrat Hashem, we are 3 lines down from where the lines widen, a little lower than the middle of the Amud, and we started discussing the Maaseh Merkava. Now, in the Mishnah, we had Endoshim Barayot B'Shlosha. We do not teach about the Sitrei Arayot to 3 people. Maaseh Bereshit B'Shnayim. Maaseh Bereshit is even more sensitive, so you don't teach it even to 2 people. And in Merkava, you don't teach it even to 1 person, which the way we explained it was that you give only hints and basically headlines only to people who are Chacham u'mevin midato, that they're extremely sharp, very smart. They can understand. You tell them a little hint, and they read the rest of it. They understand the rest of it. We mentioned that they have to be av bedin, and they have to be also libo, doeg bekirbo, perhaps. A lot of requirements to even teaching it to 1 person, right? So that is the basics that we discussed so far. Now, story in the Gemara. Amaleh Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan told Rabbi Elazar, his student. Rabbi Elazar was not just the student; he was almost a peer with Rabbi Yochanan, because he was Mara Da'ara de Yisraeli. He was the chief rabbi of Israel, so to speak. Of course, not as big as Rabbi Yochanan, but pretty much up there. We find in the Gemara in Metzia Peidalet that when Resh Lakish, the brother-in-law and the chavruta of Rabbi Yochanan, passed away, Chachamim set him up to learn as a chavruta with Rabbi Elazar. Of course, he wasn't happy, because he where are you and where was Resh Lakish? Not comparable. But Rabbi Elazar was the next choice, so to speak. So Rabbi Yochanan offered him. He said, "Come, I'll teach you Maaseh Merkava. You're fit for this." Now, we find many Amoraim that they shied away from learning Maaseh Merkava. This is something that they didn't want to learn, so they created excuses. You'll see, he says to him, Tag Agmarach Maaseh Merkava. Amalei tells, Rabbi Elazar tells back to Rabbi Yochanan, look, Ashai, I'm not old enough. Rabbi Hananel over here says, I'm not 50, right? Other Rishonim, they write, not old enough to be libo doeg bekirbo. They don't give an exact age, but Rabbi Hanan interestingly gives an age for this of I'm not 50 yet. Hikash, when he was already old enough, so to speak, Nach Nafshel Rabbi Yochanan was no longer around. He passed away already. Amale Rav Asi also, Rav Ami and Rav Asi, to what says they were the 2 twin towers of the Chachmei Eretz Yisrael, tremendous people. So Rav Asi tells Rabbi Elazar, Tavak Maaseh Merkava, come, I'll teach you Maaseh Merkava. So what's his excuse now? He's old enough. He says, well, Amareh, Izakai Gemirta mi Rabbi Yochanan Rabbah. He said, if I had the schut for it, Rabbi Yochanan wouldn't die on me before I'm old enough. I would have learned it from Rabbi Yochanan, your Rebbe, right? So therefore, if I wasn't zochet to learn from him, it must be that I'm not fit for this. He basically got out of it. He did not want to learn it. So, and again, this is something that you find in the Amoraim, that this chokhmah, they did not necessarily feel that they were fit to learn it, so they made excuses to get out of it. Rabbi Yosef, Havagamir Maaseh Merkava. Rabbi Yosef was learning Maaseh Merkava. Savi, Rabbi Yosef was a blind person, so that's why he doesn't use the verbiage for him that he was shoneh. Says he was learning Maaseh Merkava. He already knew Maaseh Merkava. Savi de Pumbedita avatanu b'Maaseh Bereshit. They were learning Maaseh Bereshit, the elders of Pumbedita. So Amrule, the elders of Pumbedita, tell Rav Yosef, they say, Ligmor Lanmar Maaseh Merkava. He says, please teach us Maaseh Merkava. Amar Lehu, he says to them, Agmerul li Maaseh Bereshit. Says, you guys should teach me Maaseh Bereshit. Now, this is, I always say, and you'll see in just a moment why this is not just relevant, but actually important. He doesn't say, let's trade off. They ask him, they say, well, let's, please come teach us Maaseh Merkava. And he says, you guys should teach me Maaseh Bereshit. He doesn't say, I'm ever going to teach you Maaseh Merkava. He just says, I need to learn Maaseh Bereshit. Can you teach me Maaseh Bereshit? So they think, well, let's teach him Maaseh Bereshit, and hopefully he'll teach us Maaseh Merkava. So they conceded, they did it. Batar Agmerun, after they taught him what they knew from Maaseh Bereshit, Amrule, they said, okay, your turn. Ligmerun more Maaseh Merkava. Now you teach us Maaseh Merkava. I said, oh, Tanina Behu, Amaleu Tanina Behu, Dvash v'chalav tachal leshonech. That sweet things like Dvash v'chalav, like honey and milk, should be kept under your tongue. That means the Chokhmat Kabbalah, the secrets of Maaseh Merkava that are sweeter than honey, you should keep under your tongue. You shouldn't teach them to other people. In other words, he felt that they were not fit to learn. Like the Rambam writes in Peru, in his Hakdama to Perush Mishnayot, the chas v'shalom for a person to think that Rabbi Yosef he was sar ayin, he was stingy, or he wanted to have something over other people, that the Mishnah says there were few people who knew certain things and they didn't want to teach it because they wanted to be the only people who knew it, right? A family that kept the ingredients and the proper recipe of the Samimane Aktoret secret. Someone else knew how to write the name of Hashem in a very special way, and so on and so forth. And the Mishnah says they did not want to teach it, and on them the Mishnah says Shem Reshaim Mirkav. The name of Reshaim should be rotting away. They didn't want to teach Torah to other people. So Rambam says, of course, even a regular person, this would be an ugly thing for them to do. Koshken, someone like Rabbi Yosef's stature. This is not. It's not that he was sarai and he didn't want anyone else to learn it or be equal to him. Chas v'shalom. He did not feel that they were fit for it, for Maaseh Merkava. He didn't feel that they had the requirements. We already mentioned many requirements of Maaseh Merkava, and he didn't see it in them. So therefore, he withheld the chokhmah from them. And as I mentioned before, the diuk of the Gemara, even though that I haven't seen anyone say this in the Fashim, but I'm sure there should be somewhere out there, the diuk of the Gemara is very much muchach that he never promised them. They may have made a mistake. They came to him, they said, teach us this. He said, you teach me that. He didn't say, you teach me that, I'll teach you this. He didn't deceive them. They may have understood it differently, but that is, of course, not the case. So says the Gemara, he said, I'm not teaching you, basically.
But shouldn't he have said that beforehand?
Well, why should he refrain from learning Maaseh Bereshit?
No one said he refrained from learning Maaseh.
They may have not taught him Maaseh Bereshit.
Okay, so he left it where they're under the impression that
the Gemara in Chulin says in this type of a case, there is a whole sugya of genevat dat, stealing someone's mind. For instance, imagine you want to drink some fancy wine. Now you don't have any other wine. So you have to open this fancy wine. And as you're going to get the wine, somebody walks in and you say, you coming in, I'm going to open the fancy wine for you, right? So that's genevat dat. It's asur to even do genevat dat on a goy. It's asur, it's deception, it's not emet, it's not true, it's not right? But the Gemara has a case over there that someone was coming to town, some people happened to be going out of town, they bump into each other, so, I can't believe that you came all the way here to greet me, right? And they said to him, no, we're coming out of town anyways, right? And the Gemara says, there was a machloket between the two. One of them held that this is deception. The other one said, no, he's deceiving himself. We didn't say anything. We didn't do anything. He thought that we are coming out to you didn't have to even tell him that the truth is that we did not come out because he's deceiving himself by thinking that we came out. Say it's very similar. They may have thought whatever they have thought. He didn't promise anything. He didn't do anything in order to create the deception. So if they thought of something, they are deceiving themselves. If anything, he's not deceiving them. So again, that gets a little bit more into Choshen Mishpat Shilas, which we're not going to delve into right now. So says the Gemara, things that are sweeter than honey and milk, they should remain under your tongue. You should not reveal them. Rabbi Abahu said from a different pasuk, Mehacha, Kevasim lilvushecha. The pasuk says Kevasim lilvushecha. The Gemara takes this completely out of context to darshanit divarim shehen kivshono shel olam. Don't read Kevasim but Kevashim. Things that are kivshono shel olam, the secrets, the fundamental secrets of the world, of the universe, Maaseh Merkava, yehiu tachat levushecha. They should be covered under your garment. You should not reveal them. Amru leh. So they wanted to get him to do it. They said, look, we already have learned some, right? It's not that we're clueless about them. We already have learned the first perek of Yecheskel. Now, a little hakdama. Maaseh Merkava, as we're going to see in the Gemara, is really the first perek of Yecheskel, right? It starts from Pasuk Dalet and goes all the way until Pasuk Chavchet, I believe it is. Those are the Maaseh Merkava. Perek Bet already is not Maaseh Merkava. So they tell him, we already have learned first perek of Yecheskel. So you could feel free. We already, have a head start over here. Feel free to teach us more, right? So he tells them, or they're saying that we have learned the basics of the first perek now. So you could tell us a little bit more about it and explain it to us. However you slice that and understand it. Taninan behu adva yomer elai ben adam. We already have learned until the pasuk vayomer elai ben adam, which is really the pasuk of va'era ke'en hashmal. This is the pasuk. I'm just trying to look over here. Yes, Yecheskel. This is a bunch of pasukim. Perek Aleph, Chaf Zayin. I believe again, this is Chaf Zayin and Chaf Kedar, the two last pasukim, and then there is pasuk Aleph of Perek Bet. So they tell him, they say, we already learned Va'era, Ad Va'era, we already have learned Vayomer elai ben adam, Amar lehu hen Maaseh Merkava. They said, oh, well, that's already, he said to them, that's already Maaseh Merkava. So if you learned that, you're good to go. You don't need me anymore. You've learned Maaseh Merkava already. The full pasuk, I'm going to just read it from the bottom here, is Va'era ken chashmal kemar'e esh. Now you'll see that these words are going to become very significant because the pasuk Chaf Zayin starts with these words. Va'era ken chashmal. I saw something like chashmal, kemar'e esh, like the sight of fire. Bait la saviv, mimar'e motnav ulmala, umimar'e motnav ulmata, ra'iti kemar'e esh v'nogah lo saviv. Right, so that's pasuk Chaf Zayin. Next pasuk, which is the last pasuk in Perek Aleph of Yecheskel, is kemar'e hakeshet asher yeh ba'anam b'yom hageshem, ken mar'e hanogah saviv hu mar'e demut kevod Hashem. This is the image of Hashem. That's the last pasuk of the first Perek, which speaks about imagery of Mar'eh Kevod Hashem, something that we don't talk about, right? As we mentioned before many times, there is nothing of a real essence of Mar'eh Kevod Hashem. It's all esoteric understandings of the sodot, of the secrets of the creation. And those two psukim, the last two psukim, are the basic essence of Maaseh Merkava, as we're going to see in the Gemara. So they made the mistake of telling you, well, we have learned first perek already. Say, oh, you learned first perek, Chazak Baruch. Like, you don't need me anymore. You already have learned Maaseh Merkava. Hen Maaseh Merkava. Gemara says, what? Hen Maaseh Merkava metve. They asked in the Bet Midrash, ad hechan Maaseh Merkava. Exactly the opposite. Until where is Maaseh Merkava? Rabbi Omer ad va'era batra. Until Pasuk Chav Zayin, which is 2 psukim before the end. Until there is Maaseh Merkava, which indicates after that, Pasuk Chav Zayin and Pasuk Chav Chet is not Maaseh Merkava. That's the mashmaut. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, Ata Chashmal. Rabbi Yitzchak says a little bit deviation, not until 2 psukim, but 2 words into the one to last pasuk. Remember, Pasuk Chav Zayin starts with Va'era ke'en Chashmal, right? So he says, Rabbi Yitzchak says, Ad Chashmal. That means Va'era ke'en Chashmal, 2 words into the pasuk. Fine. But basically, he's saying up until the 1 pasuk to the last, 2 psukim left. Says the Gemara, no, exactly the opposite. Ad va'era magmerinan, mikan va'elach masniran rashabrakim. What he means is, until va'era is no problem teaching Perek Aleph of Yechezkel. When he means ad hechal maaseh merkava means until when it's not maaseh merkava, and now you're starting the actual Maaseh Merkava is the 2 last psukim of Perek Aleph. Those are the ones that we don't explain. Until then, you can explain. When it gets to the one to the last pasuk, you no longer can explain it. You just give hints and titles and headlines, and they have to understand it on their own. Ikade Amri, there are those who say a little bit different. This is first wide line now on the bottom. Ad va'era masnira rashi prakim, mikan va'elach im hu chacham mevi midato in ilolo. Until va'era from the beginning of Sefer Yechezkel, whatever it starts really 4th or 5th pasuk, from there you could only give rashi prakim. You only hint, but you hint even to a person that's not really, really super smart, right? You can hint pretty much to anyone. But once he gets to the last 2 psukim, you only hint, even the hints that you give, it has to be only to a person that qualifies for all the criteria that we mentioned. He's the Av Bedin, he's Doeg Velibo, he is Chacham Mebin Midato, he has all the criteria that we mentioned before. So basically, the Gemara is saying the last 2 psukim, the first Perek of Yechezkel is Maaseh Merkava, and really, when is Maaseh Merkava really start? The intensity of Maaseh Merkava is Pasuk Chav Zayin and Pasuk Chav Chet, the 2 last psukim of Perek Aleph. Gemara says, what? Umi darshinan bechashmal? You just said that we could darshin to chashmal, but we know how Yenuka, there was this young kid, the darash bechashmal. He was exceptionally smart, and he understood from himself, and he started darshaning chashmal. And he was really explaining and opening up the whole concept, Kabbalistic concept of Chashmal in Maaseh Merkava. And he had a sudden tragic death. V'nafak nura ba'achalte. The fire consumed him. So you see from here, it shouldn't be mutar, because look at the tragedy that happened. That says, no, Shani Yenuka Delav Mati Zimne. That's different. We're not concerned about that. Usually people are not that smart. It was a very young person, and as we mentioned before, like Rabbi Lazar said, look, Ashai, I'm not old enough. When you're not old enough, it could be dangerous. Amar Rav Yehuda Bram Zachur Oto Aish Letov. Not that we spoke about Sefer Yechezkel, we got to speak a little bit about Sefer Yechezkel. Zachur Oto Aish Letov veChananya ben Chizkiah shemo. There was an individual called Chananya ben Chizkiah. If it wasn't because of him, Chazal would have buried Sefer Yechezkel. Why? Because the Gemara in Menachot mentions in Daf Memhei a bunch of things that seem to be a stira from Sefer Yechezkel's psukim, which is in Nevi'im, to the psukim in the Torah. Like strange things. Like the Torah says, you bring parim b'nei bakar on the korbanot of the Rosh Chodesh, you bring 2 parim. Over there it says 1 par, it says 7 kvasim, over there it says 6. A number of things that are strangely, seemingly against what is explicitly mentioned in the Torah. Now, Rambam deals with this, says, why would they want to hide the whole thing. Maybe they should just do that. Those psukim, right? And Marsha, this is a big concept in learning Gemara. If we were doing Masachet Menachot, we would actually spend time on this. But be that as it may, there were some bumps on the basic understanding of Sefer Yechezkel, and Chazal deemed it dangerous without having a proper explanation for those bumps to even have it and teach it to people. So this person, Hananiah ben Chizkiah, took upon himself, said, I'm going to explain every single bump that you guys have. And he basically locked himself up in the aliyah of his house, in his Bet Midrash upstairs, and said, I'm not coming down until I figure this out. And says the Gemara, without him, they would have hide away Sefer Yechezkel because it had some bumps. Some places in Sefer Yechezkel seem to be contradictory with the words of the Torah. Ma'asa, what did they do? They brought up for him 300 barrels of shemen, of oil, 300 in the Gemara. The Gemara says in other places is a language of guzma, right? It's an exaggeration, but basically it means a lot. They brought him to, at night. He should have shemen, to have light, to spend his time completely dedicated and devoted to this. By the way,
They weren't asleep.
he probably would. Then it says v'yashav ba'aliyah v'darash. Now says this is actually a very famous aliyah. This Bet Midrash in the second floor of Hananiah ben Chizkiah is a very famous one. It's mentioned actually in the Mishnayot, in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Yud Gimel, Amud Bet. The Gemara there says the Chachamim went to see how he's doing, and they wanted to know what he darshened, right? And these psukim. So a lot of Chachmei Yisrael got together in this Bet Midrash upstairs of his house, and he actually brought a lot of people who normally would not get together. All of the Talmidei Bet Hillel and all the Talmidei Bet Shammai came there. And the Gemara there says that Yud Chet Devarim, Gezerat Yud Chet Devarim, the 18 topics that were kind of like floating in air, there was not a clear halacha paskin because of the machlokets that was around in the time of Talmidei Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. They actually nimnu vegamru. They said, okay, these things have not been decided on for a long time. We have the most people who you could get on a regular day, basically. Everybody is here. And once they were all together over there, they counted up, they stood to a minyan, to a count, and they decided what the halacha should be on those 18 things. Gemara discusses, Rashi there brings all of them in Masechet Shabbat. So this is actually a very beneficial thing that he did, decided to answer up all the problems, the bumps with Sefer Yechezkel. And that is the famous aliyah of Hananiah ben Chizkiah. Tanu Rabbanan, 3 lines up from the bottom, going to 2. Tanu Rabbanan, Maaseh betinok echad shaya koreh bebet rabo, beSefer Yechezkel. There was this kid that was learning in the cheder, in his Rebbe's house, in Sefer Yechezkel. V'haya mevin, he was exceptionally bright, and he was understanding v'chashmal. This is the story that we mentioned before. V'yatza esh v'chashmal v'sarafato. And he had a sudden untimely death. Was burned. Ubikshu ligno Sefer Yechezkel. And because of that, they wanted to hide away Sefer Yechezkel. So it's dangerous to keep this around. Aside from the other issues that we have with Sefer Yechezkel, this is just dangerous. It's like a bor b'shuda rabim. Amar lahem Hananiah ben Chizkiah, who has been the biggest defender of Sefer Yechezkel, he said to them, im zeh chacham hakol chachamim. If this kid was exceptionally genius, bright and brilliant, you think every kid is like that? It's not something they have to be choshesh for, right? We're not choshesh for miuta de miuta, right? Now there's a shita of Rabbi Meir who's choshesh for miuta, but this is such a minority of minorities that you don't have to be concerning yourself with, said Hananiah ben Chizkiah. My chashmal. So what is this chashmal? Now, of course, we are not asking the Gemara to teach us the secrets of chashmal, because that we just mentioned that we don't darshan. And writing it in the Gemara would be basically darshaning it, right? So that's not what we are doing here. Well, it's very basic understanding of the psukim. What is chashmal? Now, we call chashmal now the electricity because it came from Sefer Yechezkel, perhaps, right? Because it's talking actually about the lightning that you see in the clouds and so on. And that's very much like what happens with electricity, and it is electricity. So therefore, we call electricity chashmal. But prior to modern era, chashmal, you have to understand what is chashmal. The only source for chashmal would be in psukim in Yechezkel. So says the Gemara, what is chashmal? Amar Rav Yehuda, Chayot esh memalelot. This is the malachim, the highest level of malachim, Chayot HaKodesh, that when they speak, this chashmal, fire coming out of their esh yotze midiburan, says Rashi. Fire sparks from their mouth. B'matnita Tana, the brighter we learn, itim chashot v'itim memalelot. Chashmal is chashmal. That means sometimes they're chash, they are quiet, and sometimes they are memalelot, they speak. B'sha'ah she'adibur yotze mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu chashot. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks, they keep quiet. U'b'sha'ah she'en hadibur yotze, when there is no dibur from Hashem, then memalelot, they are speaking. So says the Gemara, ve'hachayot ratzo v'shov. This is again going back to our psukim. This is in Yechezkel Perek Aleph pasuk Yudalet, that chayot are ratzo v'shov. Ratzo v'shov is running and coming back. So the Gemara says, kemar'eh habazak, like the sight of a bazak. So my ratzo v'shov, what's ratzo v'shov? Amar Rav Yehuda, it's like when sometimes you open the tanur, the kivshan, the furnace, and you have sparks of fire rushing out, and that's the rasov v'shuv, quickly moving. What is mar'eh habazak? Amar Rav Yossi bar Chanina ke'ura yotze mi ben hacharasim. Again, when they would make a thing in the floor, a tanur in the ground with putting the bricks, the cheres bricks around, and they would make a fire inside of it. And sometimes you have from between the bricks, you have fires oozing out. That is kemar'eh habazak. Okay, again, this is we can't stress this enough. There is an entire isur in learning Chokhmat Kabbalah called Hakshama. You cannot attribute anything physical that we understand and experience in our physical world to the spiritual world. It's one of the greatest grave sins, so to speak, in the world of Kabbalah, studying Kabbalah. And we have to understand that even though that this is the Saberet HaOzen, to explain a little bit of what seems to be an imagery, there's no imagery in the higher worlds that are totally spiritual. So that's one of the things that makes learning Kabbalah very difficult, because you have to understand that even though that sometimes our brain only operates with images, and something that doesn't have a proper imagery we can't even imagine, because that's how our brain works. But we're talking about things that don't really have any image, right? Ma demut ta'archulo. You have no demut of Hashem, even though the pasuk says Marei demut Hashem, right? But it says Ma demut ta'archulo. Hashem has no image, and he says in the pasuk in the Torah, remember you didn't see anything. It says they saw Hashem. It says you didn't see anything, right? So this is the difficulty part of this, but we have to go through not just this Gemara, but through our life, experiencing different parts of the Torah that are related to this, that there is no real physical image here, and that would actually be a very negative thing to do. Says the Gemara, the second pasuk that the Gemara wants to darshan over here, which is also from Yechezkel. This is pasuk Dalet, when this whole thing starts actually. Yechezkel says, I saw, there's a storm wind, it's coming from the north, there's a tremendous cloud, and there is fire circling in it. And there's light all around it, surrounding. And from within that, amidst that, you have like chashmal, from inside the fire. So it's coming from Tzafon. Where is it going? Says the Gemara. In other words, they have the esoteric concept of chashmal and esh and Maaseh Merkavader, but Yechezkel is a Navi. Don't forget that. Even though that he got very excited, the Gemara is going to put him in contrast with Yeshaya Navi and say who was bigger and everything that Yechezkel saw. And Yeshaya also saw, but it wasn't a big deal for him. We're going to discuss that. But Yechezkel is being given a nevuah. All the Nevi'im are people who were contacted by Hashem to deliver a message. And that's why it was written, right? So, by the way, when we say that they wanted to hide it away, is because even though the Rambam says, Yechezkel is a Navi, what do you mean you're going to hide it? Because the Gemara says in Babatra, Daf Vav, that Sefer Yechezkel was not actually written by Yechezkel himself. There were some of the Nevi'im that were written by that Navi themselves. Some of them were not, right? Written by for instance, Sefer Shofdim, Shmuel Navi wrote it, and so on and so forth. The Gemara discusses that in Daf Vav, in Yudalet Amud Bet, going to Vav, Amud Aleph in Masechet Baba Batra. But be that as it may, what was the message of this Perek Aleph of Yechezkel? What is Hashem telling Yechezkel Navi that we need to know? Says the Gemara, Lehechan Azal. Where was he going? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Shehalach lichposh et kol haolam. This is the ruach that was given to Nebuchadnezzar to go and conquer the entire world. Et kol haolam kulo tachat Nebuchadnezzar. This spirit of Hashem, this power of Chashmal, was going to conquer the entire residential area of that region under Nebuchadnezzar. Harasha, the Rasha. The Kol Kach Lama. Well, Hashem loves the Nebuchadnezzar. Well, we have other Chazal that talk about Nebuchadnezzar having the schut because he respected when he was the scribe of King Baladan. There's a whole story attached to this, but the Gemara here focuses on the actuality of the point, which is Shelo Yomru Umot HaOlam Beyad Umash Shvala Masar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Et Barav. So he was zochet to be the one that Hashem chose to destroy his house through this man. Hashem chose that the one that's going to destroy Beit HaMikdash is going to be Nebuchadnezzar. The decision was already made that Jews are going to lose the Beit HaMikdash. Who's going to destroy it? Well, it can't be just the Joe Shlomo. Hashem has to first build him up and make him a great emperor that Levanon Ba'adiripol, like the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai told the Caesar of Rome, who became the emperor afterwards, he said, you are the emperor. He said, I'm not the emperor. You should be killed and executed for calling me the emperor, but the emperor is still alive. Right? In Masechet Gitin. And as they're talking, a messenger comes and says, the emperor died, they chose you as the next emperor. So, it tells the Rabbi Yochanan, I guess it's because the Pasuk says, Lebaron Ba'adiripol. Says, Hashem only lets Beit HaMikdash to fall under a mighty person. If you're not the emperor, you're not going to be the one to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. And here is the same thing in Bayit Rishon. That was in Bayit Sheni, by the Romans. This is by Babylonians. So Hashem made him the emperor that he was in order to be Adir when he destroys the Beit HaMikdash. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mi garam li sheyeh shamash le'ovdei pesilim, avonotem shel Yisrael hem garmu li. What caused me to be serving, so to speak, the Ovdei Elidim, the idol worshipping nations, and to build up the empire of the Babylonia, the Avonot of Am Yisrael, that they caused to deserve to destroy the Beit HaMikdash, and I had to build up this Umash Shvala, the Babylonia, in order to be the ones who are going to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. But Hashem will continue this in the days to come.